Hello, my dear children. Namaste, and welcome to session 2 of our class 10 CBSE chapter How Do Organisms Reproduce? This is Ambika, your biology master teacher, right here on this amazing platform of Vedantu. So, let's get started. As always, what do you think I have in store for you first? Yes, it is a positive quote and something very, very simple, something very, very basic, and yet something that we quite often forget that we must keep in mind. Be happy, be bright, and be you because each of us is amazing just the way we are. Okay, so let's move ahead. And here are a few things I would like to bring to your notice. These are the problems that most of you have been facing, especially this year, because the modes of teaching and the modes of school education and everything have changed this year, right? So you may have a lot of unanswered doubts. You may not have proper access to notes. Maybe tests and assignments are not happening properly. Competitive exam preparation is even more of a headache. Choice of schedule, choice of language, all of these are the most common problems that most of our children have been telling us this year. But you know what? The good news is at Vedantu, we've got all of these solved for you, along with a few added bonuses, which include unlimited live classes, all micro and crash courses, performance reports, personalized attention, and so on and on and on. These are just a few of the many bonuses and many of the special features that we have. So, what do you do to know more about this? Just visit vdnt.in slash YTPRO and you will be guided through a set of steps. So you get to choose your grade first. So most of you, I'm assuming you would be in class 10. So you will have to choose grade 10 here, and then you will have to select your target. For you guys, mostly it's going to be CBSE 2021 or anything else accordingly. Okay, and then check out all the details. The features that I've told you plus a lot more have been mentioned here in the courses that we call Vedantu Pro. Okay, and then what do? Of course, click on the button Get Subscription. Now comes the big question of pricing. So we don't want to hide anything from you. Here is everything right there for you, transparent and fully accessible. Here I present before you the pricing that we have for a 1 month subscription, a 3 month subscription, and a 6 months of pro subscription. So 1 month subscription to the pro courses would mean that for one full month, you have unlimited access to all of these features that I have been telling you about. Okay, so normally the amount payable is 2,699, but application of this code AMBPRO is going to reduce it to 2,294.15. This is for 1 month. Then for 3 months, the normal amount payable is 6,999. Application of the same code AMBPRO reduces it to 5,949.15. And we have 6 months of subscription for you, wherein for the entire 6 months, you have full and unlimited access to all of these features. What about the pricing? The amount payable normally is going to be 11,499, whereas application of the coupon code AMBPRO reduces it to 9,774.15. So just go through it. There's nothing to lose. All you have to do is just click on the link that I told you, vdnt.in slash YTPRO, and the coupon code that you must keep in mind, AMBPRO, so that you can avail the benefits that I have just mentioned to you. Okay, and let's move ahead. Starting with the homework question that I gave you in the last session, name 2 organisms which perform multiple fission. Now, what is multiple fission in the first place? Yes, it is the type of asexual reproduction wherein, because of certain unfavorable conditions, one parent nucleus splits up into many daughter nuclei within a hard covering called the cyst. And then finally, when favorable conditions return, as you can see in this animation here, the cyst wall breaks, releasing all the daughter nuclei or all the daughter organisms. So this is commonly not seen in higher organisms. It's most commonly seen in some protists and some of the monerans also, like bacteria, for example, and protists. Examples include amoeba and paramecium. Euglena also does exhibit this to a certain extent. Okay, so Moving ahead, in today's session, we are going to be understanding what is sexual reproduction, what are the advantages of it, and about sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Okay, guys, so let's move ahead. I've told you in the last session that the types of reproduction can broadly be divided into two based on the number of parents involved in it. It can either be asexual reproduction or it can be sexual reproduction, wherein, as you see, the big fat Indian weddings animation is given to you to represent sexual reproduction just for a fun element. Okay, but it just we are just trying to tell you that two parents are involved in sexual reproduction. Okay, now coming to what is sexual reproduction. Asexual, we've covered everything in the previous session. Now coming to what is sexual reproduction. Here, as I told you, two parents are involved producing different types of gametes. Okay, so basically we have a male parent and a female parent producing two different types of gametes. As we know, in the case of animals especially, it's going to be the sperm, which is the gamete produced by the male, and the ovum or the egg, which is the female gamete. Fusion of the sperm and the ovum would result is what we call fertilization, and that results in what we call the zygote, which develops through continuous cell divisions into a fully formed baby organism. Okay, so moving ahead, who reproduces by sexual methods? Most importantly, we must remember some microbes do, even bacteria for that matter, some bacteria do reproduce sexually. Animals, of course, most animals, especially higher animals belonging to the kingdom Animalia, higher animals especially reproduce sexually. Okay, and then flowering plants. If we ever thought that plants reproduce only asexually, no, we are mistaken, because flowering plants, which we call angiosperms in technical language, in botany, we call them angiosperms. Okay, angiosperms of flowering plants also have the ability to reproduce sexually. Okay, so now coming to the advantages of sexual reproduction. What is so special about it? First of all, sexual reproduction causes variation. Okay, this is a result of combination of variations from two different individuals, which eventually, over many generations, leads to evolution. Right. So as you can see here, this is actually a step which is involved in a type of cell division which we call meiosis, which is a type of cell division through which sperms and ova are formed in sexually reproducing organisms. So you don't have to know the steps of meiosis for CBSE class 10. ICSE 10 has it well in detail. And I remember we also had it in CBSE when I was in 9th standard. But then I think in the current syllabus, they don't really focus much on this. You will have to learn this more in your 11th standard, if at all you're going to be taking up bio, that is. Okay, so just for you to know, we've put the basic steps which are important, which are relevant from meiosis from a point of view of sexual reproduction. So what you see here is one paternal chromosome and one maternal chromosome forming a pair that we call homologous chromosomes. Okay, so this orange chromosome is a member of chromosomes that you're getting from your father. The red one you're getting from your mother. And because they are similar in size, appearance, and the kind of genes they carry and all of that, we call them homologous chromosomes. In the first stage of meiosis, actually, this pairing up of homologous chromosomes happens by a process we call synapsis. Okay, and then the next step is crossing over, wherein the members of homologous chromosomes, as you can see, exchange certain segments of their chromosomes. Okay, which means at the end of crossing over, you see them like this, modified like this. Look at it, the orange one having a bit of the red segment, the red one having a bit of the orange segment. Okay, so this crossing over is what results in what we call recombination. New combinations of genetic material is what it means, and this results in variation. This is why we don't look like carbon copies of either of our parents or like our siblings, unless you're gonna be having an identical twin sister or brother. We normally like resemble our parents and siblings, but we have a lot of unique features also because of what we call variation. So over many hundreds and thousands of years, when variations accumulate over generations, it results in what we call evolution. Okay, so one reason for evolution is variation. Another reason for evolution is also what we call mutation, wherein in the genetic material or in the genes or chromosomes of an organism, because of some random reason, be it an environmental change or be it something else, suddenly there can be a slight difference in the structure of the gene or chromosome of an organism. That is something that we call mutation. So mutations and variations are usually the base of evolution. Whereas think about it in asexual reproduction. Do you think this would happen? Absolutely not. It's only one parent that is involved there. There is no scope for recombination, no scope for variation, which is why parents and offsprings end up looking like carbon copies of each other, right? So let us move ahead and try to look at the next advantage of sexual reproduction, or the next important feature of sexual reproduction. Now, we know that although two individuals are involved in the process, the number of chromosomes of a particular species is maintained. For instance, you, me, and any other human being that you can think of, each of us in our cells, we have the standard number of 46 chromosomes or 23 pairs of chromosomes. Even if I had 2 or 3 children, each of them would have 46 chromosomes. Okay, you get 46 chromosomes from your parents. Your mom and your dad, they also have 46 chromosomes. Similarly with me, my parents also have 46 chromosomes, and so on. How is it that despite the genetic material from two different individuals mixing up, how is it that the number of 46 is maintained? Wouldn't it get doubled up, like 46 plus 46? Wouldn't it become 92? Actually not, because in meiosis, the type of cell division that I told you, wherein gametes are formed, be it the sperm or ovum, through the process of meiosis, the number of chromosomes in a gamete gets reduced to 23. So a sperm has 23 chromosomes, an ovum has 23 chromosomes, which means during fertilization, when they come together, the zygote is going to be having 46 chromosomes. Okay, so N represents the haploid number of chromosomes, which is 23 in humans, and 2N represents the diploid number, which is 46 in humans. Likewise, every sexually reproducing organism has a different diploid number. Tiger has a certain diploid number of chromosomes. Dogs have another diploid number of chromosomes. Snakes have another number, and so on and on and on. Okay? The number of chromosomes is what makes us identifiable as one particular species. What marks me a Homo sapien, or what marks me a human being, or what marks you a human being, is the fact that we have 46 chromosomes in each of our diploid cells in our body. So basically, in case it's confusing to you, the 23 and 46, let me make it easy for you. In our body, okay, in every sexually reproducing organism's body, every cell except your reproductive cells have 46 chromosomes each. Whereas our reproductive cells, because it has an additional responsibility of fertilization later on, our reproductive cells are designed in such a manner that they have only half of that diploid number, which is 23 in us. Okay? As simple as that. Except your sperm or ova, every other cell in your body has 46 chromosomes, while your sperm and ova have only 23 chromosomes. Okay? And there we go. Let us quickly answer a couple of questions, or 3 questions max, to see where we stand right now. Dash is considered most important in the case of sexual reproduction. Okay? How is sexual reproduction made possible? Is what the question is. And your time is up. Gamete formation is considered most important, right? Because I told you through meiosis it's formed, and 23 chromosomes are cells having 23 chromosomes each are the result of meiosis. Next, dash is the root cause of evolution. There, I have told you the answer to this already. Mutation, variation, mitosis, or do you think it's both A and B? And your time is up. The answer is both A and B. I told you. Mutation and variations are what we call the root cause of evolution. Now, dash is common among higher organisms. Asexual reproduction, sexual reproduction, fragmentation, regeneration. Super duper easy, I guess. And your time is up. The answer is sexual reproduction is what is most common in higher organisms. Okay, so good job. In case you've got all the answers correct, I'm sure most of you would have got it correct. Let's move ahead and try and understand more about sexual reproduction in flowering plants. I told you angiosperms or flowering plants carry out sexual reproduction. So, what is the flower? The flower is actually the reproductive part of angiosperms. Okay, in case you did not know that, flower is the most important part with respect to reproduction in flowering plants or angiosperms. But let's remember, flowers may either be unisexual or bisexual. We call them unisexual when they have only the parts of one gender or one sex in them, which means, for example, in this image, if you look at it, the second image, okay, image 2 here, unisexual flower, you see that it's got only the female reproductive parts in it. There can also be a separate flower in which there are only male reproductive parts. Okay, so be it male or female, as long as a flower has only either the male reproductive parts or the female reproductive parts and not both together in the same flower, we call it a unisexual flower. Okay, whereas a bisexual flower, as the name indicates, is one in which you would find the female parts also and the male parts in the same flower. Okay, so pistil, ovules, ovary, stigma, style, all of those are female parts, and the filament, stamen, all of them are actually male parts of a flower. Okay, just a second. Yeah. Right. So let's move ahead and try to understand the most important parts of a flower. There we go. As I told you, before we move on to the male and female parts, let's remember that a flower would have a stem, a sepal, this part which we call the sepal, and it's got colorful portions which we call petals. Right, perhaps the most attractive ones, be it for us or for insects, which come for, sucking nectar, all of that, petals are said to be the most attractive parts of a flower. Anyway, now going on to the more significant ones with respect to this session. This portion which you see here is called the pistil, which is the female reproductive part of a flower. Okay, what all does it have? It starts with this topmost portion called the stigma, and below that is a long neck-like portion called the style, and then the bottom swollen portion which we call ovary. Okay, and inside the ovary there can be, we find either one or many parts which we call ovules. Okay, ovules are 1 to many in number. It's different for each species. Okay, so stigma, style, and ovary together form what we call the pistil, forming the female reproductive part. We also call the pistil by another name, which is carpel. Carpel and pistil both mean the same thing. Okay, now moving on to the male reproductive parts. Focus only on this portion, children. We just have to talk about two major parts. This portion at the top, which we see here, is called the anther, okay, where the pollen grains are produced. And this portion, like its appearance, it is called the filament, and the anther and filament together form a structure which we call the stamen, which is the male reproductive part of a flower. Okay, so carpels or pistils form the female part, stamen forms the male part. Hope you're clear until now, because this understanding is the basic one that you must know before we proceed. Okay, now coming to pollination. I told you honeybees and many other insects get attracted looking at the bright and colorful petals of a flower, right? The process by which pollen grains get transferred from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the same or a different flower is called pollination. Of course, what you see here in this animation or in this GIF here is just two honeybees moving around happily. They are there to suck nectar. That's all that we see. But then they are perhaps innocently unaware that they are carrying out a very, very responsible job. What is it? When they move from one flower to another, by accident, they are perhaps carrying pollen grains from the anther of one flower, and when they go and sit on the second flower they are perhaps unknowingly depositing it on the stigma of that flower, or it could be the anther of one flower to the stigma of the same flower itself, or another flower of the same plant. Whatever it is, that's a different thing, but they are perhaps unaware of whatever they are doing in this through this act. Okay, this is what we call pollination. So, as I told you, pollination can either be self-pollination wherein the pollen grains are transferred from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the same flower. So, in this case, it doesn't really need the help of insects or wind or water or any other pollinating agent, because it's within the same flower. It can naturally occur. Deposition of pollen from here to here is not really such a major task. Okay, that is what we call self-pollination. Now, what is cross-pollination? Cross-pollination, as the name indicates, is the type of pollination wherein pollen grains from the anther of a flower are getting deposited on the stigma of a different flower. Okay, when two different flowers are involved, we call it cross pollination. So, for cross pollination to happen, some kind of external help may be required, and that help may be brought about by different pollinating agents, which may be water, it may be wind. When the wind blows, it can possibly carry pollen grains from one flower to another, or it can be insects, or even birds for that matter. All of these are examples of pollinating agents which carry out cross pollination, which help in carrying out cross pollination. Okay, now what? Once pollen grains have been deposited on the stigma, be it of the same flower or a different flower, that's not the point. Now we are getting into the more serious technical details. What is it? The pollen grains, as you can see here, has gotten deposited on the stigma of this flower. Then there is a very good chance that if it is a successful pollination, most likely if the male and the female flowers belong to the same species or genetically compatible species, these pollen grains here can germinate under the right conditions on the stigma. They can germinate and they begin to form what we call the pollen tube. Okay, the pollen tube. The pollen tube is formed and it grows further and further below, and it gets attracted and enters into the ovary all the way down, enters into the ovary, and inside the ovary what it does is it enters into the ovule. I told you there can be one to multiple ovules. What you see here is inside the ovule of that particular ovary. Okay, the one of the ovules of that particular ovary. So of course it is a zoomed in version because you won't be able to see these nuclei externally. It's a microscopic structure, obviously, just like any other cell or any other nucleus. So now let me tell you that the pollen grain, it's important to understand this. One pollen grain normally has two sperm cells in it. Okay, so what happens is when the pollen grain germinates here and forms the pollen tube, as it goes down, the two sperm cells get released inside the pollen tube and both of them come down. Okay, both of them enter, and here I think in blue you can already see the sperm cells. They enter into the ovule, and inside the ovule you can see many different types of cells. One of it is the main cell. What do you think that would be? The egg cell, which is the middle one that you see here, the egg cell, right? And then we have a lot of additional cells, like on either side of the egg cell. There are two cells which we call synergids, and here we have a couple of polar nuclei. These two that you see here, the polar nuclei, and you also see three cells called the antipodals. Okay, the antipodals, polar nuclei, egg cell, and synergids are all found inside the ovule. Now what happens? So how do the sperm cells know what to do next? One of these sperm cells happen to fuse with the egg cell. So fusion of the sperm and the egg cell, the sperm and the egg cell, obviously that is what we call fertilization. And what do you think it would result in? This results in the formation of the zygote. Yes, fertilization results in the formation of zygote, a diploid zygote. What happens to the other sperm cell? The other sperm cell actually goes and fuses with the polar nuclei here. Right? It fuses with the polar nuclei, and all those three nuclei, the sperm cell's nucleus and the polar nuclei together, form a structure which we call the endosperm. You can see it here. Right? So now coming into the zoomed in version, I think I've given you a gist of what happens. Now just the ovule alone zoomed in and magnified is what you see in the right side image here. So there we go. Release of the sperm cells is happening. One of the sperm cells fuses with the egg cell. The other sperm cell fuses with the polar nuclei. And this forms the zygote. Obviously, egg and sperm fuse together. That is fertilization number 1, which results in zygote. Yes? A diploid zygote. Fertilization 2 is where the sperm cell fuses with the polar nuclei. We just call it fertilization, but there a zygote is not formed, but rather an important tissue which we call the endosperm. It's 3N or triploid because 3 nuclei are involved. 2 polar nuclei plus 1 sperm's nucleus are involved, which is why the triploid 3N is written there. Why is the endosperm important? Why does it have to be formed parallelly with the zygote? Because endosperm is much needed to provide nourishment to the growing zygote, right? So as you can see, because 2 rounds of fertilization happened here, one for the zygote formation and the other for endosperm formation, we call it double fertilization in a flowering plant. Okay, so this is very, very important to understand, children. Generally, at least one question comes based on this concept. So I think by now, if you are thorough with this concept, if you have a clear understanding of this concept, guaranteed 1 to 3, or if you're lucky, 5 marks right there in your pocket already. Okay, so make sure you don't lose those marks unnecessarily. It's a very, very simple concept. All you need is slow and patient listening and understanding and remembering of these terms. Okay, most important nuclei you must know here are the egg cell and the polar nuclei. Okay, that's it. And do remember zygote, endosperm. Double fertilization has happened. Now what? I told you the zygote has to grow. Just like in the case of a human embryo development or human zygote development, this zygote carries out multiple rounds of cell division. 1 cell becomes 2, 2 cells become 4, 4 become 8, 16, and so on. And eventually, it forms a structure which is ready to take up the form of a baby plant. What do we call that structure? We call it the seed. So what I'm trying to tell you is that it is the ovules which develop into the seed through the processes that I have told you, and the ovary which is around it develops into the fruit. So following fertilization, ovules develop into seeds and ovary becomes the fruit. What happens to the other parts? The petals, sepals, stamens, stigma, style, and any other parts shrivel and fall off. This is why we say the flower is said to be the reproductive part of an angiosperm. Its whole purpose is reproduction, sexual reproduction, and this is how it occurs. Ovules develop into seeds, ovaries develop into fruits. Ovaries are around the ovules, right? So obviously, like you see here, like the cut section of an apple is what you see here, or any fruit for that matter. You see the fruit, and inside that you see the seeds. Ovary, and inside it you see the ovule. Okay, so I hope that is clear to you now, how fruits are formed, how seeds are formed, and what double fertilization is. Okay, Now, about what happens next. Seeds are formed, we've said that. The seed, as I told you, contains the future plant or the embryo, which develops into a seedling under appropriate conditions. This process is what we call germination. Yes, and the cycle keeps continuing. Okay, so let us look at the life cycle of a flowering plant, an overview of it. As for any plant, when I have to tell you how does a plant grow or where does a plant come from, we would perhaps first think of the seeds, right? Seeds first, the seeds germinate. Successfully, they germinate under appropriate environmental conditions, and then after germination, they undergo full growth, they exhibit full growth and maturity, and after that, pollination happens because they've also developed flowers, and pollination happens with the help of environmental agents or within themselves if they are a bisexual flower. After pollination, fertilization, double fertilization occurs, and through that process, seed formation happens and the cycle continues. This is what, children, the life cycle of a flowering plant looks like. Okay, so I hope that was very, very simple for you guys to understand. And with that, let's move ahead and answer a few questions very, very quickly. Okay, quick check. The flower of hibiscus, mustard, etc. are dash. Unisexual, bisexual, mostly unisexual, maybe bisexual, or none of these. Okay, leave alone mustard. What does a hibiscus flower look like? Every Indian would have seen a hibiscus flower. I'm pakka, I'm 100% sure. What all parts do you see? Even in your school, I think your teachers would have shown you the hibiscus flower in your lower classes to show you the parts of a flower. And you are right. They are bisexual. You see the stamens and the pistils in the same single flower. Now, dash is a male reproductive part of the plant, or dash is the male reproductive part of the plant, of a flowering plant, obviously. And your time is up. Yes, the stamens. Okay, stamen is the male reproductive part of the plant. Now, dash produces pollen grains. What do you think? Yes, very simple, and your time is up. Stamens most certainly produce pollen grains. In case you're wondering what corolla is, it is just referring to the petals of the plant. Okay, you will learn more about it in detail in class 11 if you're going to be taking a biology. Now, the swollen bottom part of the pistil is called dash. Stigma, style, ovary, or none of these. Swollen bottom part of the pistil. And your time is up. It is the ovary. Remember that structure in case you don't? Something like a flower vase. Yes, it looks something like this. This is the stigma. This is the style. This is the ovary, inside which there is the ovule, one or many ovules. Okay, and now, if the transfer of pollen occurs in the same flower, it is referred to as dash. If the transfer of pollen, it's not this, okay, if the transfer of pollen occurs in the same flower, it's called cross-pollination, self-pollination, sexual reproduction, or asexual reproduction. And your time is up. It is self-pollination, occurs within the same flower. The name indicates it. Okay, and great job, guys. I think you guys have done an amazing job of having understood a very, very, very important concept as far as your responsibility is concerned as a biology student, or from the perspective of your CBSE class 10 board exams also. You have done a great job of understanding this concept. You now know, and we can confidently say this, what is sexual reproduction, advantages of sexual reproduction I have told you, and sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Now, your homework question for today. List the conditions required for germination of seedling. Okay, it can be condition or conditions. What could it or they be? I told you under appropriate conditions, seedlings germinate and form a fully developed plant. So what are those conditions? Let's see who's going to be giving me the answers first and the best answers. Okay, and remember, guys, just visit vdnt.in/YTPRO, and the coupon code is AMBPRO, which you can use to avail the best benefits that we have out there for you. And thank you very much, children. If you have found this video useful to you and if you have enjoyed it, please do not forget to hit the like button, because otherwise I have no means of knowing whether this has been useful to you or not. Please do share it with any of your friends, be it CBSE 10, CBSE 11, or ICSE 9 or 10, or anybody for that matter, whoever you think will benefit from this. And in case you've not subscribed to our channel Vedantu 9th and 10th English, please do hit the subscribe button below this video right now, because every single day we keep coming up with as many interesting videos and concepts and live sessions as much as possible, especially mentee quizzes and stuff like that, so that you guys can have fun as you learn. So until we meet again, this is Ambika signing off. Take care, stay happy, and stay healthy. Bye bye.